Yeah, I would never have put him on a list because when I think Rule 5 pitchers, I think massive stuff and no command, not command without massive stuff. And that's not, I mean, it's not a knock on Englert, Mason Englert, because he has really good command. He knows how to use his arsenal. His fastball's super interesting. I mean, I'm just Baseball America. They put it best. It's a very generic shape, so it's a very hittable pitch. But he has really good release traits on it in terms of his release height, and that means it plays really well up in the zone. So when he elevates it, he actually gets a lot of whiffs, despite the fact that it's a low 90s fastball. And I think that's super interesting, especially when you look at the rest of his arsenal, where he can get a curveball and changeup, and he can just go east to west with it and stay at the knees with a lot of consistency. So you can do that. You elevate the fastball. He can even use a fastball and go east and west at the knees too. The command is just so good, and that's important because he doesn't have that overpowering stuff. That's how he's found a lot of his success. And he's been tweaking his slider. It by the end of the year, it had, I think it had more depth from the starts that I watched from the beginning of the year, or at least early on in his season versus the end. I think the slider had more depth. I think he used it a little bit more, but the slider is the one pitch he will not use a lot to both-handed hitters. His changeup, his curveball, he will use pretty much whenever. I only saw a handful of sliders maybe. He threw one gorgeous back foot slider to a lefty though. So that was really good to see. It's a nice arsenal. You'd love to see if he can get a couple more ticks, if they can unlock a couple more ticks. Obviously, I think he knows that too. He's probably working towards it because if he can get to, instead of being 91 to 93, if he can be 93, 94 more often, he becomes less of a long relief type option in my mind to being a back end starter to being a ceiling of mid rotation. I think he has a ceiling of a back end starter right now, which is absolutely ludicrous to get in the Rule 5 draft. There was a lot of talent out there this year. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to use his stuff because he can't make many mistakes. And I am stealing this from somebody on Twitter. I can't remember who tweeted it, but Matt Boyd didn't throw very hard. Maybe they brought him in on a year, 10 million with the plan of getting Englert and being like, hey, teach him how to do what you did. You know what I mean? So you can stick in a rotation. I know it's lefty righty there, but that wouldn't be an unheard of or bad situation. I don't think that's exactly why they did it, but if anything that can help him along, I think the Tigers could get a decent starter out of Englert.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of it was a calculated gamble by the Rangers. I'm sure they like him a lot. There's a couple of great stories about Mason Englert on the Athletic, and one of them, the Rangers scouting director talked about like that's my guy. I love him. He's going to be great. So yeah, I don't think they wanted to lose him, but they did have a full full 40 man. They've got a pretty good system, and they've got a lot of interesting talent at the big league level. So they were just kind of hoping, I think, that nobody would take a starting pitcher, or even if they did, he would have to come back because he wouldn't be able to stick in the big leagues. And the Tigers, I, one thing about AJ Hinch is he's really thoughtful about the way he manages players in terms of like finding places for them to play and finding the right fit for them. And I think he could absolutely make it so Mason Englert sticks on the roster, just finding places for him to pitch here and there, getting him a spot start every now and then. Uh,
Yep.
so yeah, I mean, but we'll see. I mean, maybe he comes out and he gets absolutely blown up, and the Tigers just are like, yeah, it's not worth it. But I mean, I watched him too. I was impressed by the command, and the stuff was solid. Like, um, Mark Gorosh made an interesting comp on the show last night. He compared him to Joe Ryan of the Twins, because Joe Ryan is a guy who gets a ton of swings and misses with his fastball up in the zone, and it's not a high spin pitch, and it's not high velocity. It's the release point, the low release point, and that's kind of what Englert has.